I'm Councillor Dave Shilton. I'm the Vice Chair of Regulatory and be sitting in for Bill, just this one item. The way the meeting will take place, the officer will present the item, then the points of clarification for members, unlimited and not for merits on the application itself. At that time, the officer will respond. Then the objectors will be allowed to speak. I've got a list here, and you will allow 3 minutes each. After that, members to clarify objectors' points, and the officer to comment. Point 5, applicant to respond, 3 minutes. Then the members to clarify applications' points, the officers to comment to those. Then we'll move into debate, and that would be unlimited, but it will be managed, believe me. The final one, recommendation to the meeting. Once it's had a proposer and a seconder. That is the way the meeting will be conducted. I will ask all those people who were not speaking, please to keep silent and just listen to what other people do during the debate. It's so essential that is. Right, so item 1, Sally, if you could now, the officer to present the item.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal itself is for an 80-space car park on St George's Way in Nuneaton to serve Bermuda Park Station. If I can update you on 2 points. One is the letter you've just received a copy of. It was an objection received yesterday from the MP Marcus Jones, and if I can just read that out to you, and then you have a copy in front of you. Whilst I welcome the principle of parking provision for the new station, I believe a rethink is needed over this proposal, which will jeopardise important employment land on which UPS are proposing to create 150 new jobs. My concern, in addition to the loss of vital employment land, is that the 80-space car park could become a white elephant based on current and projected demand for the station. I would urge all members of the Regulatory Committee to reject this proposal. It is disproportionate to the demand for car parking at the station and will threaten 150 new jobs. The second point on which I'd like to update is some information on the planning history of the site. The extant planning consent that I refer to in paragraph 4.1 of the committee report, and also referred to by the applicant in their submission and by UPS in their objection, which was for the demolition of warehouse and construction of the new HGV servicing depot, ancillary offices, external washway and a 2.4 metre fence. This actually relates to a site to the north of the application site, north of Burlington Road, and this development has been built and is now occupied by a railway. From information received and forwarded by Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council Plan Department yesterday, there appears to be no extant planning permission on this site for the car park. The last planning application approved in the vicinity of the application site was in 1996 for a 3-storey side extension to the existing building, which at that time was occupied by Links Distribution Services. The buildings on the UPS site have now been demolished, and you will see those in my slide presentation. No information has been received from UPS as to what they propose for the site in detail. If I can then run through the details of the site itself. As I say, it's an 80-space car park to serve the station. Looking at the larger site plan, outlined in red is the application site for the car park. The station is to the north. It's, as the crow flies, 120 metres to the northwest, and walking it's actually 150 metres between the application site and the station. The site is currently owned by UPS and is laid out as car park presently, but it is the land that has the outstanding, the confusion of the consent is to the north west of the application site that is now occupied by Renault. This is the application site outlined in red again, and the UPS site is the horseshoe-shaped site occupying the rest of the land to the south. Again, the site plan. An indication of the layout of the car park with access onto Burlington Road. The application site itself is 0.4 of a hectare in total, and the UPS site as a whole is 4.3 hectares. It occupies, in fact, 10% of the UPS site. This is a view taken from the southeastern corner of the application site, looking north up St George's Way. You can see the security fencing around the perimeter of the site is 2.1 metres in height. Again, this is the southern boundary of the site. This is the northern edge of the site, looking south down St George's Way, the junction with Burlington Road. And this is the northern boundary of the site onto Burlington Road. Again, a view looking west along Burlington Road itself. The access would be on the left-hand side of the road along that point. This is a view of the application site itself, currently laid out as car park and unused. This is taken from the eastern boundary of the site, looking northwest. You can see the overhead electricity pylons above, the lines above, and they actually, where they lead to, there's a building there that you can see, and that is the Renault distribution centre. Again, if you're looking west across the car park site. This is the UPS site to the south of the application site. It is also laid out as parking and has an area of scrub in the centre, which is where the previous distribution building was located until it was demolished sometime between 2010 and 2012. This is on St George's Way looking south with the industrial buildings to the eastern side, to the western side of the road. Bermuda Park Station south, and this is the on-street parking and the cycle store. Again looking south. And then St George's Way itself, travelling north. It's a cul-de-sac at present and leads to Univar Limited is the north of the road. The need for the station, there are currently 30 on-street parking spaces, 3 for disabled and 2 drop-off spaces. The station is new and being built this year. Its use will increase over time as it becomes established, and as there are more destinations to be accessed from this station, its use will increase. This is going to Coventry Arena Station, Friargate Development near Coventry Station. The train frequency is due to be increased from 1 service per hour to 2 per hour in 2018. Off-street car parking is more secure and will be better used than on-street parking. The size of the car park proposed with 80 spaces is to ensure that it is future-proof, so it's large enough to meet the needs in the future. If the Bermuda connection scheme is approved, the replacement of the on-street parking spaces would be required, as there would be a requirement for a shared cycle path and footpath, which would remove much of the on-street parking. There would be a retention of the disabled spaces and the drop-off facility there. In terms of the impact of the development, there are no residential properties impacted by the car park. The nearest residential residential dwellings are in Feather Lane, which is 350 metres to the northwest, and Griff Gypsy and Traveller site, which is 250 metres to the southeast. There's no adverse impact on the commercial properties to the north of the application site, on that northern side of Bermuda Road. And there's no adverse impact on the ecology of the site. There's no conservation status, and there are no records of protected species on the site. Lighting and CCTV provision would increase the security of parking on the site, and these would be required by conditions. The owners, in terms of impact, also the owners of the site, UPS, have made the case that the car park would prevent their redevelopment of the site and therefore have an impact on their property. In relation to highway matters, there is a need for pedestrian crossing points along the 150-metre route to the station, and this would be in the form of drop curbs and tactile paving. There is pavement on the western side of St George's Way. Here you can see on this is the western side looking south. There is pavement leading down to the application site. On the opposite side, so to the south of the application site, on the eastern side of St George's Way, the pavement moves across to that side. There is an error in my report actually stating that there's a requirement for a signalised crossing in the form of a toucan crossing. This wouldn't be needed for this car park application. That would only come forward as part of the Bermuda connection scheme. There would be a highway requirement for conditions in relation to the access to the site from Burlington Road to ensure that there's control of vehicles parking on Burlington Road, that they don't obscure the access and reduce visibility of the junction. In relation to policies relevant to this application, the development plan itself is the Nuneaton-Bedworth Borough Plan, Local Plan 2006, and its safe policies. It is not the emerging borough plan, which is due for consultation early next year. The relevant policies are EMP 14, which relates to employment land, which should be retained for employment use unless it would be unviable to develop, or if the development would have an adverse impact on nearby residents. The car park does not accord with this policy. However, it's only 10%, the car park is only 10% of the total UPS site, and it wouldn't leave the remainder of the site unviable for employment, so it's not preventing development of the remainder of the site. The second policy relevant is the MV1, the Greenbelt policy. The Greenbelt boundary in this location runs north-south along St George's Way. The boundary is actually to the eastern side of the road, and a car park would not accord with Greenbelt policy. Policy T6 relating to public transport interchange is also relevant to this application. It makes reference to the provision of a park and ride facility in the locality of the station. This really is an overriding policy. There is a conflict in between the local plan policies, and you need to look at the development plan overall to determine which is the deciding policy. And it's considered that policy T6, the provision of the park and ride facility in this case, takes precedence over EMP 14 and EMP 1 policy, and that the proposal is considered to be compliant with the development plan. In conclusion then, the application is for a car park on land that is currently laid out as a car park. It's ancillary at present to the original V8 use on that site, and it would then be an application for, proposal for the car park to be no longer related to that storage. The proposal accords with the development plan, and there are no planning reasons to refuse the application. I dealt with this application for the car park itself. Grace, my colleague, has dealt with the applications for the station and for the Bermuda connectivity scheme and has had discussions in relation to those. It could be helpful if any questions Ian may well need to help me answer questions. If that's okay.
I can pick your point.
It does, yes.
Thank you. Right, members, point of clarification. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to get some clarification on the mention of the connection scheme, because there seems to be a contention in the notes here that in a way this is irrelevant, because you seem to be saying there's a need anyway for these car parking spaces, notwithstanding the connection scheme. So I just wonder how far we ought to be taking the connection scheme into account in your view.
It is a standalone scheme. There is a future need for the parking. As I say, it will change. The station is new. It's going to increase in use over time. There are other things coming online further down the connection, the train line, that will require or will encourage people to use the station. So there will be an increasing need for parking in this area, regardless of the Bermuda connection scheme. So it needs to be seen it stands on its own.
So through the Chair, we should be taking the connection scheme into account to some extent, you seem to be saying, particularly in relation to the longer term. Is that the case?
No, the station itself is new. It's establishing itself. There will be an increased use of the station, and there are destinations close by, further down the line in Coventry, that will encourage people to use the station. So there will be a need for a park and ride facility, regardless of whether the Bermuda connectivity comes into play.
Any further points of clarification?
It's 150 metres from the car park to the station. Are there any other sites nearer for the car park? I mean, obviously there's a lot of contention about UPS want to develop this site, so presumably, I know we're just looking at this application, I'm just trying to get in my head a few clarification. So is there another site near at 150 metres? And this 80 spaces car park, your projection is because of the extra usage and is it 2 trains per hour all through the day? Because I just wanted to know what the usage would be of the station, because you obviously justify these 80 spaces. And the other thing I was just, I mean, what's really at issue is this sort of, it's a site that could be used for a parcel distribution, offering jobs, but there's no application at this moment for that site. Is that what you said, yeah?
That's correct. If I take your first point first, the other sites nearby, the only other open sites nearby are greenbelt locations,
Right.
so they would be seen as unsuitable. So.
Yeah.
In relation to the 80 spaces, it's to be future-proof, so that there is adequate facility in the future for the increased needs. The number of trains per hour, I think, is through the day when I mentioned that. Yeah. And in relation to the parcel distribution, sorry, can I just clarify your question?
I was just asking because this UPS seems to want to develop this site, and obviously they're saying it's going to create a 150 job, whatever it is. But I just, as I said, has there been an application for this site?
No,
so there isn't,
no.
so we're just judging. Okay, thanks very much.
Any further points of clarification? There being none, I will then move on to the objectives. And the first one on the list is Objector Councillor Keith.
Thank you very much, Chair. It might be useful to look at the map, which is between pages 22 and 23 in your pack. I won't talk about the UPS site or the local things. I'll let the other objectors do that. What I wanted to talk about was the alternatives to actually developing this site. The applicant has put in a document saying what the need for the car park will be, and eventually they predict they'll need 43 spaces, not 80. And there's existing 30 spaces on the road. So we're roughly trying to build a car park twice as big as what the experts say we would need if everything was going well. Clearly everything isn't going well, the station isn't that popular, and it's hardly used. You know, most days there's no car there. But looking at the alternatives, if we're looking at a car park for the 43 people who are expected to park there per day rather than the 80. There's clearly land on the, as your diagram is, right-hand side of the railway station where the Bermuda is, of Bermuda Park Station. That is where the compound where they built the station was. And that has lots of advantages over building it on the employment land. It is on the Coventry Road, so people going to this station wouldn't need to go around the Griff roundabout, so it's already more convenient. The bus route runs down the Coventry Road, which is also on the right-hand side. So actually building a transport interchange on the right-hand side of the station actually gives us less disruption in employment land. It actually links in better with the bus services, and it's actually a better place for a car park for people coming from either the Cadwell or those sort of areas, because it means they do not need to go round the full roundabout of Griff roundabout. Going round Griff roundabout, you might as well drive to Bedworth then, where there is also free parking for the rail service, and train fares are about 80p to £1 cheaper. So you can see it's very marginal, this station, in terms of its attractiveness. So the more you make people go round the Griff roundabout to this new car park, and if it's charged, that put more people off. The consultants reckon a charged car park at this site would attract 11 visitors per day. So we've got a serious problem. As soon as you try and charge for this car park, because the train journeys are so short, you know, Bermuda Park to Coventry, or it really does put people off using this car park. So it's going to be a white elephant if we don't make it free and convenient. And I really hope we build a smaller car park on the other side of the railway line. This has so many advantages in terms of connectivity and can link in with the other modes of transport. Yeah, there's not even a pedestrians footpath sign on that little footpath going across from Bermuda, Coventry Road, and there's a old canal there as well, which could be reopened. So there's lots of advantages in moving the car park proposal and making it smaller, and potentially making it double deck. That's your expansion, rather than taking up a lot of valuable employment land. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. My next speaker, and I'll ask you when you're speaking to please try not to repeat what the previous speakers said. I'll ask Council to clarify after the speakers have done clarification. The next speaker is Claire Goldie, Nuneaton Bedworth Borough Council.
It's me. I did send in some pictures to go along with what I was going to say. Did you get any? No. I've got a few printed. Can I just distribute them? I've only got 4 copies, so kind of sums up the usage. Thank you. These, unfortunately, we've put them in a little bit late.
I know, I did email them.
I mean, to be fair, if you put the picture of the car parking up as it stands, that will do, because that's pretty much it day in, day out. So. Yeah, that's fine. Pretty much all my pictures look like that.
Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah.
We'll start in 3 minutes.
Okay. I can echo what Councillor Condon is saying with regards to the position of the current car parking. This is actually literally a very good snapshot of how the car park looks on a regular basis, except at weekends when we get the overnight lorry drivers rocking up and going on to Bermuda Park for a drink. But that's another story entirely. So on the 28th of September, I spoke at the Nuneaton Bedworth Borough Council Cabinet meeting on an agenda item relating to employment land review. The purpose of the agenda item was to seek Cabinet approval of the Employment Land Memorandum of Understanding, the need of which was generated by a significant shortfall of employment land in Coventry. We as a borough are required to take 26 hectares from Coventry via redistribution, in addition to the 87 hectares of employment land already required to meet the borough's own needs. Work is currently being undertaken to confirm whether there is a capacity in the borough to accommodate this, plus our own requirements. In the appendix of that agenda item, it was agreed, but to be confirmed in the borough plan, that the Nuneaton Bedworth should make provision for 113 hectares of employment land within the borough. This agenda item also referred to a report called Unemployment and Urban Regeneration, the Atkins Report 2014. This analysed which parts of the sub-region have the greatest need for employment and jobs creation, and not surprisingly it was confirmed that Nuneaton and Bedworth are near the top of that list, with the latest available data showing that Nuneaton and Bedworth have the highest unemployment rate in the sub-region according to the English indices of deprivation. Nuneaton and Bedworth are one of the only local authorities in Coventry and Warwickshire that are ranked amongst the 50% most deprived in England. The Atkins report went on to conclude that consideration of population growth, unemployment rates and deprivation levels suggests that the greatest area of need in Coventry and Warwickshire are Coventry and Nuneaton and Bedworth and North Warwickshire. All this being said, and with the need to find further employment land to lift Nuneaton and Bedworth out of the 50% most deprived areas in England, how can a plan to remove existing employment land, which the current landowners have categorically stated in this room actually, in fact, in November, their desire to invest millions of pounds upon creating over 100 jobs, how can that be looked upon favourably? How can the removal of employment land for the sake of a car park be justified? Removal of this parcel of land will actually have a knock-on effect of making the site unviable for the landowner's intended purposes. Let's be honest. Pardon?
30 seconds.
Okay. Basically, if you remove this car park, the bridge will then be more viable. The Atkins report with the submitted with this plan says there's going to be 1,000 plus vehicles going down that road every day. You cannot run a logistics facility with 1,000 plus vehicles on your doorstep. That's how the land becomes unviable. That's the long and short of it, really.
Thank you. That was absolute time. Perfection.
You're lucky because I could have been on for a lot longer.
Well done. Right, I'm going to ask now for Mr. Giles Williams, the UPS owner of the land.
Yes, that's me. Good morning. I'm Giles Williams. I'm Director of Real Estate for UPS in Europe. As you're aware, the application relates to land owned by UPS, for which we do have development plans and which will require the investment of many millions of pounds and will generate many hundreds of jobs. Our letter of objection sets out this information in detail. You will have it. And we have also attended meetings with Councillor Seckham, Councillor Butlin and a number of council officers over the past 15 months to explain our position. I do not therefore want to repeat that position in detail, but I do want to reiterate that it is our intention to develop this site. The threat to our land ownership and this planning application has placed us in an uncertain position and is a major factor in the delay to our making a final decision to proceed. I want to address in particular the statement in point 5.46 of the notes to the meeting, which states, given the overall size of the unit, there is insufficient evidence to indicate that the application proposal would materially prejudice the viability or benefits of its redevelopment for employment use. I want to inform you, the committee, that the removal of this area from the overall site does indeed prejudice the viability of the site for our proposed use. As UPS have explained in a number of meetings with your officers and councillors, the removal of this proposed area from the developable site does affect the size and configuration of the building which can be constructed to a degree which calls into question its viability and makes it unlikely that our development and investment will proceed in this location. I also want to inform the committee that we have offered a compromise solution of a smaller area to your officers and to your councillors, which would allow construction of our building to go ahead, albeit with a smaller footprint than we originally planned. That compromise has been rejected. That's it. Thank you.
That's you completed. Thank you very much. I'll start up, May, or 2 notes for the objectors. Oh, by the way, I will inform you that the MP for the area, Marcus Jones, has also objected to the application. I'll ask yourself, if I may, Mr. Williams, what exactly are your plans for the site itself?
We want to build a 20,000 square metre warehouse, which would be for a healthcare logistics use.
Right. And what specific steps have you taken to implement
all the steps that we've taken so far have been internal. And as I said in my statement, the fact that we have had these discussions over, potential compulsory purchase of the site and now this planning application really mean that we can't solidify those plans any further at the moment.
Right, so then why exactly would the car park prevent implementation for your plans?
Because it affects the size and the configuration of the building. There's the building itself, and large high bay warehouses of this type of design need to be a particular configuration because there are racking rungs and all those sort of things inside it. Externally, there are also trailer staging and loading positions which need to be accommodated. If you take out the chunk that we're talking about here, the 4,000 square metres, that does affect the viability of the entire building.
Right, so the employment side is very important to Nuneaton itself, and Bermuda, I should say. Would the car park then prevent the site being successfully marketed to another employment user?
I don't think that's a question for me.
Right. Are there any further points of clarification? Councillor Rickard. This is to all of these speakers.
Sorry? Yeah, yes. Just got to Councillor Cundical first, in relation to what Councillor Cundical said. I just want to query where Councillor Cundical mentioned experts and what they were saying, and seemed to imply that the experts were contending that there wasn't really a need for such a big space to be used. I'd just like some clarification through the chair of who those experts are, what the evidence is.
Yes.
With the planning application, there's 6 documents online, and there's one which is the justification for the need, which Bermuda Park Station Demand and Capacity Review. So that's one of the documents put in by SLC Rail. So it's actually on the County Council's website, and it was dated June 2015, so it was slightly before the railway station opened, and that was a forecast justifying the station car park capacity, and that gave the figure of 43 spaces needed if the car park was free of charge.
Thank you.
I did have another one as well, this time for Mr Williams, through the chair, yes. Mr Williams, you just mentioned 4,000 square metres to be taken out of what earlier on you were saying the overall was 20,000 square metres, and that seems to be more than the 10% which is referred to in the notice.
The 20,000. Sorry, the entire site is 4 hectares. The building would be 2 hectares. So the 20,000 square metres that I referred to was the building, not the entire site.
So, I mean, you wouldn't argue with the 10% figure we're given here that is required?
I'm not arguing with the fact that it's 10%, no. I'm saying that 10% does affect the viability of the site for us.
Sure.
Right, Councillor Moss.
Thank you, Chairman. Question for Mr Williams. You mentioned a lot of your company's proposals. Are any of them subject to are any of them in the pipeline? Sorry, start again. Are any of them subject to current planning applications?
No.
No. Okay.
And the reason for that is because of the uncertainty that these discussions, as they started out to be 15, 18 months ago, and now this planning application are having on our decision-making process.
That clarifies. Thank you very much.
Councillor Gitters.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just another question for Mr Williams. I was just wondering, in your opinion, whether or not the loss of this comparatively small area of your site, whether that loss would be outweighed by the benefit which would be provided to your 170 new members of staff which you're proposing. In other words, loss of those car parking spaces, would it actually benefit your new staff members who may well use that alternative form of transport to and from work?
I think it's unlikely that it would benefit them. The operation that we run is a 24-hour operation, so we have a lot of people working at night time and coming from all different parts of the region. So most of them are likely to be car-borne and arriving at perhaps strange hours of the day and night.
That's all.
Yeah, as this isn't a question of UPS, but a question perhaps going back to Councillor Condicor's original submission about an alternative site the other side of the road with a fewer number of car parking spaces. To date, I don't think there's debate any response has been made by the authority as to whether that site is in any way or useful or whatever. And I just wondered if there's any comment to make about that.
Get the officer to answer.
I suspect that will be dealt with, Chair, by the applicants themselves.
Right. Thank you. Is there any further questions?
Well, can the applicant answer?
The applicant itself will address that situation. Okay, at this present time. Councillor Williams.
Question for Mr. Williams. Until the proposal came to convert this part of your land to a car park, how long had the land been left undeveloped?
About 5 years, probably.
So 5 years ago, it was a working site or something?
Something like that, yes.
Because I went to the site in 2013, it was not developed then.
That was 3 years ago.
Thank you. Yes.
Two questions, Councillor. You say you've got these buildings that can fit, but I mean, surely you can adapt these buildings. Is it got to be that full amount of square metres you said? I mean, this is only 10% of the whole site, that the car park, and it just seems that it's a very rigid formula that you've got for that size. I mean,
yeah,
so
clearly we've looked at that and we've played around with different building configurations, but just the removal of this piece from the corner of the site affects the configuration of the building to such an extent that it would mean that it becomes unviable for us.
Okay. Can I just ask the lady behind, I could remember the lady's name.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. You said something about 1,000 cars a day going through that road, is that correct? So, I mean, it's been said this is going to be a very vastly underused station, and I'm just amazed that 1,000 cars have been going through. It means there's a lot of flow of passengers, so should as the train station gets more well known and the destination, there would be more usage of the car. I mean, that seems a lot of vehicles to be passing
You would
that station.
think, yeah, but again, referring to the documentation that was submitted with the planning application, it does actually state that there will be over 1,000 plus car journeys per day, but the new road bridge does not generate significant numbers of mode switching passengers, which means they will drive past the station and not use it. That's in the application submission, the document submitted with this application. So, no, you're looking at flooding the area with vehicles and not train passengers.
What sort of group have come up with that survey of those figures then? I mean, has there been any allowance for the increase of traffic at the station? That's what I'm asking. You just say that you think these 1,000 journeys will totally ignore the station.
Well, that's what is in the documentation submitted by, I don't know, I can't remember which one it is off the top of my head. Is it the SLC rail document? Yes, it's the SLC rail document.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, in the work, ask a question.
So just one question from Mr. Williams. You say you've experimented with configurations. Are there any detailed designs that our planners have been able to see or that they could see to understand why this car park is incompatible with your own?
We have shared some different designs with your fellow councillors and officers.
The planning officers included?
I think they were in. I think they.
No, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
So some of the designs, but not without planning officers, so you haven't got a clue what it looks like.
Myself and Sally have seen no such plans.
I think the plan's not designed.
Yeah, that was not designed.
No, we've not been involved in that discussion.
It leaves us a bit short on where we're looking at.
clarity when they came to see us with this, all we got was a basic drawing, which was basically a map, an OS map, with a square which went from boundary to boundary to boundary, and they said that it was basically very, very basic, and that's the only plan that we saw when we had that full meeting with UPS and the leader and the officers.
I'm allowed me to speak as a portfolio on this subject. So there's been a lack of communication somewhere online, which we have to deal with as a regulator, either now or at a later stage. Right, I'm going to move on then, and I'm going to go to the applicant now. Oh, by the way, there's a supporter, Councillor June Tandy, who's not here today, has registered her support for this. And the applicant now, Mr. Alan Creedy.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Alan Creedy. I'm a Chartered Town Planner with 30 years' experience both in the private sector and local authority sector, and I'm working with SLC Rail. Thank you for the opportunity to present this application. As most of you know, Nuneaton is a very congested place and many people are struggling to get to their places of work in and around the borough. Part of the solution to this congestion is shifting trips from car to rail, and constructing Bermuda Station was the first investment by the county to reducing this congestion. It was the first investment to actually, it was your commitment to increasing the number of carriages and the frequency of trains, which are now actually putting in place. Both those investments are designed to encourage rail use and sustainable transport solutions to bring in investment like the UPS that we're talking about. So the public sector investment already made in the station is aimed at reducing congestion, but its success is dependent on increasing the future use of that station. Studies by Arup, referred to by others, confirms the level of use that will be required in the future for that car park. It confirms that 80 is a reasonable number, Chair. So this 80 is central to ensuring there is sufficient car parking space for the future growth. Safe car parks close to rail stations encourage people to switch from their cars to rail. This is an ideal location for the car park. 4 alternatives have been looked at, and this is the site which satisfies the criteria of security, safety, cost and accessibility. You've heard from the objectors and their concern about the loss of jobs, the loss of inward investment caused by the car park. The report that you have before you and the work that we've done as part of the application demonstrates that their concern is misplaced. Yes, on behalf of the county, we've been negotiating with UPS for some time in an effort to agree the size and location of the car park. A car park which is overhung by high-tension power granting of the Planning Commission would stop or prejudice developing the remainder of the site or creating a significant number of new jobs. It's important to note as well that Nuneaton and Bedworth have not objected to the application, and it's also important to confirm that there have been no pre-application discussions about the development of the site. We discussed with the borough the essential need for the car park, and as part of this the County Council has asked for the park to be allocated in the new borough plan. The application seeks to establish the principle of the car park, and in doing so it asks for the detailed design, cost of parking, hours of operation to be the subject of conditions. That's been agreed. So the report before you confirms a number of things I'd like to draw to your attention.
20 seconds.
The long-term need for the car park is justified even if Bermuda connection is not approved. The car park will increase the attractiveness and use of the station, and granting planning permission will encourage the creation of jobs and inward investment, not, as the objectors say, compromise it. And in conclusion, I would recommend that you approve the application.
Thank you very much. Again, that was slap on time. What's the clarification? Yeah.
Can I ask, thank you, Chair, can I just get this straight, because there seems to be a lot of confusion. So there's no other alternative car park site near the station that you think would be big enough or do the job for you? Because, I mean, Councillor Condacor said we could go the one for 43 places right next to the station. So I'm just getting my mind clearly from what you said and the projected figures. I can understand the stationary increase, but that is the most viable car park in your profession that would serve the station's needs. And you say you looked at 4 other possible car parking sites, but this is the most valid one. Is that correct?
Chair, through you, Mayor.
Yep.
Yes, 4 sites have been looked at, and a whole series of criteria were drawn up. Those 4 sites were tested against those criteria, and those criteria broadly were opening up the west side of Nuneaton, its cost, accessibility by people with disabilities, its the extent to which it would prejudice existing known businesses and economic and job creation, and the one on the west side, the east side, is on landfill, so it's contaminated, so it will be incredibly expensive to actually develop. The others would prejudice known and existing businesses and really wouldn't satisfy the long-term growth needs of the car park and the rail station.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
And that is are you talking about all of the other alternatives?
Yes.
So, that's all.
No, just one is contaminated, that's right. The others have infrastructure issues, like service diversions, culverting, things like that as well, which would escalate the cost and affect other sites.
Right, thank you. Councillor Webb.
Well, thank you, Chairman. In fact, I was seeking the opportunity to come back and ask about the investigation on the other sites, and then you took the council fairly before me, so thank you for that, Mike. I don't need to ask any further questions.
Oh, that's good. Councillor Brown.
Yes, I just want to be clear about the viability of developing the land in relation to the overgrown power cables. Are you saying that restricts buildings, or?
No, what I'm saying, as it stands at the moment, the height of those cables would preclude the development underneath it of perhaps the scale of the building that has been alluded to by one of the objectors. So there are inherent difficulties in the land identified by the red line boundary and proposed in this application as a car park, in that being developed for buildings.
Have you seen the scale of the building that's proposed?
A number of sketches have been tabled by UPS during the course of discussions.
So what would be appropriate then in height?
Underneath the pylons, I wouldn't say, I couldn't comment on what would be consented by National Grid under that. There are restrictions and there are wayleaves as to what would be allowed.
So it's a guesstimate then?
It would be a guesstimate.
I don't know if you can see the cable.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Can I make a comment on that?
I will allow you.
Thank you. We're not proposing to build under the high tension cables. The building would be away from that area. However, the area underneath those cables would be used for servicing the site. So as I said in my comments, that we require additional land for access to loading doors, to park trailers on, and that nature of things. So that's really what we're talking about in that area.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Mr. Creedy, forgive my ignorance, and maybe I've misheard, but you mentioned Arab. I'd just like to know what Arab are and where they're coming from, as it were. And I didn't mishear, you did say Arab.
Arab, yes.
Yeah. I've no idea what that means. So, but also, besides knowing who they are, I'd just like you to make a comment on the assumptions that are being made in this study on the your future levels of use, what assumptions they're making about the growth.
Chair,
need a bit more detail.
Sure. Arups is an international consultancy that was appointed by Warwickshire County Council to undertake a demand study for the long-term needs for parking, also to look at the likely future growth in Bermuda Station, considering a whole series of variables. So that is the employment generating opportunities in and around Coventry, the employment opportunities in and around Nuneaton, and what they've produced is a series of ranges and a series of predictions, some of which you have heard. Interesting, the quotations from the objectors have been selective. We've actually put into the public domain the entire report, and you can see the full range. And yes, there are illustrations of when a car park of 43 may be appropriate. Equally, there are illustrations of when a car park much larger would be needed as well. And so 80 is the figure that we have chosen as a balanced view on what the likely long-term growth is going to be and what we feel is justified.
Any further was a clarification by committee members. Officers, do you wish to comment or add anything to it?
Nothing to add, Chairman.
The only thing I was going to point out while we've discussed the overhead lines, from the plan behind me, you can see where the overhead line actually just cuts across the proposed car park that you're being asked to consider today. And so, in terms of the presentation from UPS, they're saying that area wouldn't be developed, so it would be a part of their open area anyway.
Could I have just one question of the planning officers for clarification, which is we have two rival accounts of what the car parking study recommended. Councillor Cundicore says 43 spaces, Mr. Creedy says 80, which is right.
It very much depends how you choose to read it, I think it's fair to say. Because the car parking study provides a series of options and scenarios. And it does legitimately, as the objectives have pointed out, relate also to the potential opening of Bermuda Bridge, the Bermuda connectivity scheme. But it does demonstrate that there is a need for car parking, which is unlikely to be met by the current car park if the station becomes more popular. And it's fair to say, when we dealt with the station in the first place, for cost reasons as much as anything else, we accepted a car park which was less than perfect. A dedicated car park for the station was the preferred option. Effectively, we accepted a lower standard than that. This gives us the option to accept that highest standard. So, and the report suggests that that may be achieved.
Gentlemen, the gentleman said that the site near the station is uncontaminated land. Is that correct? Would that
Yes. It's an old landfill site. It's also an agreement.
Right.
Our constraints upon it.
Inappropriate. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
As we all know, contaminated land is a dicey subject.
Yeah.
We have to be very, very careful. Councillor.
Yeah, just a last question, I guess, but we talked about, I think when Sally made a submission, she said that in fact this is an area which historically has been used for car parking, is marked out for car parking, and is an application to turn it into a car park. Am I correct in what you said?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so it just seems a little unusual that we're even having to consider it, but there we are.
It was an ancillary use previously to the distribution warehousing, so now it's purely a car park in its own right. Public car park.
Right, Councillor, not that there's any more clarification. Can I just point out, do you honestly believe that you have enough information today to make a decision?
Yes.
If you do not, then you may defer for a few weeks. I wouldn't say any further than that, it's not fair on the applicant or the objector who is done. So it's up to yourselves, as long as you're clear-minded on what direction you believe you have all the information that you could possibly require, and it is really and truly, it's on a car park versus employment. That's the two aspects of it all. It's your choice. So we're going to debate now. We start off with applicants.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've listened to the debate, and I feel that I fall in favour of the officer's recommendation. I first heard of the Bermuda station in this committee we were into a site visit. And I'm pleased to say that Councillor Tandy supports this because she's a local ward member. Just look at the map and you see the hinterland to the station. It's a large proportion of population who are available, who weren't using the previous station. We can say they can walk to the station, yes, but in this world we live in the 21st century. People have cars sitting outside the house. They would need a short journey, park there and add to the convenience. They also say the need for developing this car park be improved if the connection doesn't proceed well. It is going to proceed. I think it's a sound system. I'm not convinced by the owners of the land. It's obviously going to be subject to a compulsory purchase order. I think we should get on with it as soon as possible. So I'm happy to support the Austin recommendation.
Councillor Perry and Councillor
I'm just going to say that my only slight reservation, I think, is the question I asked and Mr. Grace followed up with, is that we haven't seen a definitive drawing from you. And I did ask about, that configuration, has it got to be that size? And all I would, my only thing, if you did defer it, was to see you brought plans to our planning people that could really look at it and vet it and say, well, we could achieve this. I'm just a little, it's a big decision because we want employment in on the, obviously Councillor Coulter, we all want that in Warwickshire. So I just want to think as a committee, would that be I think someone will vote for it to go ahead, but I'm just a bit uneasy that we haven't had detailed plans for us to make that really firm decision. And especially if our planning officers haven't been notified or had a consultation. So I'm just wondering, I don't know what the other members of the committee, but whether we should defer and Mr. Howard has a meeting or with detailed plans to see if we can accommodate the two, because at the end of the day we want a successful station and we want employment on that side. And it's a big decision for us to make, and I think what you just said, Chairman, really in my own mind, I've got that doubt, and I am surprised a little bit that you haven't come forward with much more detail. You seem to be very firm that that is the only size will fit. We're just trying to get the right balance here. But Chair, it's just open for the members whether you feel a deferment, that they have proper negotiations, to see if we could. If you can't, then I would certainly go on with Councillor Williams, because I think we need to get the station up and running and go ahead, Chairman. But that's my just concern at the moment. It's just there hasn't been enough detailed communication between the two parties.
Some very good points in place. That's what I want all committee members to really think about. Right, Councillor Dodds.
Thank you, Chair. Normally, when we have an application come before us, it's pretty clear cut for me as to go one way in favour of an application to be successful. Unfortunately, on this occasion, there's too many ifs and buts. My main concern is the fact that this is employment land, and I think it sends out a very poor message to potential businesses in Warwickshire if we want to turn down the opportunity of jobs being created within a particular borough, when all you want to do is just have a static car park. I understand the reasons for the car park, I totally get that, but I think the message is that we'd rather have a car park than jobs and investment. And I think it's not really something that I can get my head around actually on that particular score. The Borough Council in Nuneaton and Bedworth have clearly got reservations because of the actual new economic development policy that they're putting through. There's objections from local members, from local residents as well. And I just think that they know the area better than all of us, in particular from me, who's from Rugby. And I think it would be wrong of me to actually, at this stage, when it's not clear cut, to go in favour, to actually vote that way, when I think that local views should be held. Therefore, on everything that I've seen before me, I can't at this stage support the application, because I do feel that when we've got a business like UPS that are actually saying that we want to create jobs, so I think we should explore that opportunity first. If nothing comes to fruition, we can come back and look at it again. But I think it's incumbent upon UPS to probably make that decision as quickly as possible, so that it would benefit all parties. But at this stage, Chair, I can't support the application.
Could I say that it seems as though you're supporting what Councillor Perry was said about the detailed plans from UPS, and like a deferral until we've seen those, and our officers have seen that to make a final judgment.
I'm not saying, I'm not saying, Chair, with respect, I'm not saying to defer. What I'm actually saying is, on the evidence that I have before me this morning, I can't support the application. That is my position.
So are you making an amendment to the present proposal as it stands?
It's not seconded yet.
It's not seconded yet, Chair,
Yeah,
so therefore I'm saying I'm not supporting the application this
Yeah,
morning.
I'm a fault. I do apologise. Right, we'll go on with the speakers. Councillor Gitters and then Councillor Mayor.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I think a lot of what I feel has kind of been reflected in what's been said. And I suppose all I do is I kind of look back on how I would feel about this application if it was in an area which I represented. And you know, I have some commercial business parks within my own scope, and I would be concerned about the possible prospect of the loss of a major employment investment in that particular area. I haven't got enough information here, and indeed, if this was a formal proposition that Councillor Perry was making, I would be prepared to second his proposal that this matter should be deferred to enable us to be provided with a rounded, holistic view as to just what the actual possible impact might be of the loss of this employment opportunity on this.
I'm prepared to put that amendment, Chairman, with that suggestion.
Let me just see then now. Have I got, before bringing Councillor Redding, do I have a seconder at this stage for Councillor Williams' proposal to support the recommendation?
You would have if you brought me in.
I found a second.
I seconded it, yes.
You second. That is for the recommendation to go this time.
As it stands.
Councillor, right, so Councillor Webb.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Quite interesting talking about the rugby situation actually from Richard Dodd, because I represent the area around Rugby Station, and the problem with commuters parking is the thing which gives me my single biggest headache. That's even bigger than any hangover that I've tried. It's simply because we have a necessity, don't we? HS2 demonstrates this, to try and get people onto the rail network, and that's one of the reasons that this authority felt it was very important to build the Bermuda rail station, and that's to encourage people to go onto the rail. And what we did in Rugby was to find that trains were stopping there, and mostly people were walking to the station or trying to get in taxis. But everything's changed. People do tend to drive to their nearest railway station, and they do tend to need to park the car. Economically, there may be a small fee, there may not be. That's something which can be examined in terms of cause and effect at some point in time. However, this authority does need to have some kind of forward vision, which says that at a point in time, the potential use for this station, which is what we have pushed the whole idea for, is going to generate the need for car parking spaces. So there is a point at which we as an authority have to look at making sure that parking provision is available. Now, as to whether 43 is right or whether 80 is right, I would like to think that actually thinking for 80 is better planning than actually thinking for immediate need as established in 2013 or 14 or whatever, 2015 I think was this quote. Because that's the way it is. We need to think bigger, and sometimes as authorities we react to responses and we don't allow ourselves to have that kind of vision, which we should have, really. So let's think about the vision, and as such I'm quite prepared to second Councillor Williams' proposal that we do go for it. Having had the information which says we've looked at alternatives and for various reasons they're not acceptable, I'm not very happy on the cost reasons, to be honest, Alan, but nonetheless there is finite parameters which we work within. I'm not convinced that the UPS site, which is there in this land, already belongs with, because we've not seen a planning application, that we can't actually have UPS in partnership with us, thinking about how we can accommodate the needs for the area. We have got the Bermuda rail station there, we have got future employment land there as well. And, you know, if parties sit around the table and decide how they can accommodate the various needs of the area, then perhaps, just perhaps, the residents and employment prospects, etc., can be accommodated. At the moment, sadly, we've not got an application from UPS. If we had, it would say that clearly we could say clearly, this is how this ought to be utilised, and that's what we want a planning permission for, and we would be considering that one first. However, we don't. But we do have a proposed and future need for making sure that people are adequately able to get their vehicles pretty much as far as possible off the roads, not causing unpleasantness, etc., to the environment, to residents nearby. Because it's incredible grief. It really is. It causes more trouble. Sorry, I'm my biggest headache. Yeah? It causes more trouble to residents, for those who find that their environment is congested by poor parking than anything else. And I think we need to have that vision, and I think this is the time to do it, because this is the time to talk about partnerships and future developments, etc., etc. But let's at least get the idea and the vision of having a sensible car park and village station in place. I second.
Thank you. As always.
I just want to come back. Just this suggestion, this is employment land. This has been unused land for quite a long time. It's only when the county became interested in this becoming a car park, that UPS suddenly said, oh yes, well, because they could see the value of the land going up, presumably, I don't know if that's the case or not, but I find it quite remarkable that the employment land was not recognised, but it was just almost abandoned land for 5 years at least. And now we're saying it's valuable employment land, but it wasn't employment land before. There's no opportunity to develop it then. I realised other matters. But the situation was, this is land not being used for employment. It's only when we were interested, suddenly became opportune. And we've seen the power cable didn't really stop the development going about it. It's going to be assembly yard and all that sort of thing. I just don't think I buy that story. I just hope that you all support me, not defer it, because that doesn't achieve anything. You've got all the information you need, and we're going to vote.
Thank you. So, on the proposer and the seconder.
Sorry, could I just say like customary 3 things in these circumstances? First, the question you should ask yourself is not whether you have all the information that you could possibly want, but whether you have enough information, i.e. all the information that you reasonably require to make a sound decision. Secondly, any applicant has an expectation of fair and prompt dealing with their application, and you should consider whether it would cause any unfairness to any of the objectors if they were not given more time to articulate and expand upon their objections. And thirdly, where is a deferral likely to yield any more information, useful information and evidence than you already have?
Thank you. Is everybody understand?
Yeah.
I'm trying to be as fair as I possibly can. Across the whole.
I'm just going to say that it's all right to say 5 years ago the land's been dormant, that there was a recession and developers and people go and invest for the future. So it's been like that for a long time. So surely a few months for this committee or whenever. I'm going to Mr. Harris. It really is incumbent on you to get detailed plans to our planning officer. Then I think at least you one developer or one company could provide employment there, and if you can't, then if he comes back, then it's open and perhaps other people make application. But surely we can wait a few weeks or a little bit longer to make sure you get the right decision. Because at the end of the day, I'm sorry, a car park is not as important a man's job and livelihood for his family.
Chair.
So, and I'm surprised, Alan, from your side that you actually said that. But I appreciate that. But I did say that we want a successful station and we want a successful employment, don't we? And I just feel it's incumbent on this committee to wait a few weeks, and if Mr. Harris can give that assurance that he will give some plans, then we look, and we can come back and then we've got a much more informed way of making the judgment. And if that's all we're here today is to try and get the best result.
Chair, I want to make the point again, which I made earlier, in that this is employment land. Currently employment land. Potentially used for employment. Potentially 170 jobs. Car park is not employment land, unless you would plan on having 170 parking attendants.
Right, okay. Councillor Reddy, do you wish to come back?
Yeah, the point is, if you remember I urged, you see the point is, we don't own this land, and as a result of the planning application, that will give us an opportunity to go along and apply for compulsory purchase from UPS. However, if in the meantime UPS also put an application covering this land to provide 170 jobs, the outcome of that compulsory purchase order would be affected by the fact that a second planning permission was there. And I imagine if it was found to be more critical at that stage, it should happen. Bearing in mind that that land has sat dormant for a long, long time, I'm not confident that that will happen. That's why I think we should proceed this way.
Okay, I think that's clarified where we are.
Point of order, Chair, if I may, because I'm not clear what's been proposed and what hasn't formally. I mean, has there been a proposal for deferral or not?
No, it hasn't been proposed. It's been proposed to move the recommendation as set out, the car park to go ahead. It's been, an amendment's been put forward, it's been seconded, that we defer for a few weeks until perhaps the next meeting to get further information from the objector regarding the building plans and the employment side of this, so you've got a further view of what it's likely to bring about. The objectors, which are saying the employment land, as the committee members have said, is so important to the legal bedroom. So that's what it is, and that's the amendment. Yeah, I believe that, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Has that been seconded?
Yes,
That's been seconded. Right, we will now then move to the vote. I hope that everybody before it takes vote feels that you will have a good opportunity to speak for and against. This decision of this regulatory committee is...
we doing the amendment first?
Yes, oh yes. Yes. We will take, it's been adjusted. So therefore we'll take the amendment first. All those in favour of the amendment, that is to defer this application until the next meeting for further information to come forward. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. Okay, you got those? Those in favour of the recommendation as set out to allow this area to become a car park. 2, 3, 4, 5. That is passed. So the granting of the application as set out by the officers goes ahead.